The Varelia orbital station hung in the black sky like a silver coin above a blue-green world. Hundreds of lights blinked around its metal body, marking the edges of docking bays and defense towers. For most travelers, it was only a trade hub. But today, something more important was happening. The first peace meeting between humans and the Varelian Empire. Lieutenant Mark Harris, an engineer from Earth, stood near a large viewport, staring at the stars. He had repaired ships in asteroid storms, fixed plasma drives in zero gravity, and crawled through ducts full of sparks and steam. But nothing made him as nervous as this, working with an alien government that barely trusted his kind. Behind him, two Varelians whispered in their native tongue, their voices soft and echoing. Their smooth blue skin caught the white light of the station, and their long, graceful limbs moved with elegant precision. Humans were short and rough compared to them, and the difference was easy to see. Mark sighed. Just another day fixing what others broke, he muttered, adjusting his tool belt. A voice behind him replied, sharp and musical. And just another day cleaning up human mistakes. He turned. The speaker was a Varelian female wearing a dark officer's uniform. Her eyes glowed faintly like sapphire glass, and the symbol of the energy core shone on her chest. "I'm guessing you're my partner for this project," Mark said with a tired smile. "I am Officer Zyratal, Energy Division. I was told a human engineer would assist with the reactor repairs." "I did not expect him to be so casual," Mark grinned. "We humans fix things better when we're relaxed." Zira raised an elegant brow ridge. "We Varelians prefer precision over comfort." The two walked through the long silver corridors of the station until they reached the reactor chamber. It was a huge room filled with humming conduits, glowing coils, and transparent coolant tubes that pulsed with blue light. The core, not a tall column of plasma, glowed like a captured sun. A Varelian commander briefed them quickly. The main power regulator was damaged during last week's surge. If it fails again, the entire station could lose containment. "You two will stabilize it manually. Be cautious." When the commander left, Zyra looked at the damaged section. "The stabilizer coils are fused." "This is delicate work," Mark nodded. "Delicate's my middle name," he joked, then picked up a plasma wrench. Zyra blinked at him, confused. "Humans have strange customs with names," he laughed quietly. "Yeah, you'll get used to it." They began working side by side. The sound of tools clinking and soft humming filled the air. Mark removed a burned conduit, while Zyra recalibrated a control panel with her long fingers. She worked with speed and grace, but her movements were overly careful, as if she feared touching something wrong. "Don't worry," Mark said, noticing her hesitation. "If it sparks, step back. Humans are good at dodging fire." "I do not intend to cause fire," Zyra replied stiffly. After an hour of work, Mark finally broke the silence. "You know, for a peace station, everyone looks ready for war." Zyra didn't look up. "Trust is not easy to rebuild. The Varelian Council still remembers the human expansion wars." Mark sighed. "Those were centuries ago. We're not the same people anymore." "Perhaps," she said softly, "but memory lasts long in our kind." For a moment, there was only the soft thrum of the reactor. Then Mark smiled. "Maybe we'll start new memories today." Zyra glanced at him. For the first time, she didn't look cold. "We shall see." Hours passed. The temperature in the room rose slightly as energy levels climbed. Mark wiped sweat from his forehead and crouched under a console to fix a broken relay. "Pass me the fiber coil," he said. Zyra handed it to him carefully. "Your tools are primitive." "Maybe, but they work." Mark twisted the coil into place and tapped the console. "Try running diagnostics." She did, and the screens lit up green for the first time. The energy flow stabilized, but only for a few seconds. Then a red warning blinked across the panel. "Core pressure rising," Zyra shouted. Mark stood up quickly. The regulators jammed again. "We need to vent the chamber manually." They rushed to the emergency controls. Steam hissed around them and the floor vibrated. Zyra moved toward a valve high on the wall, climbing a maintenance ladder. But halfway up, the metal shook violently. The reactor groaned like a giant beast. "Zyra, hold on!" Mark shouted. The ladder bolt snapped. Zyra slipped, her limbs flailing. Without thinking, Mark leapt forward, catching her midair. Both of them crashed hard onto the safety mat below. The air left their lungs and sparks rained from the ceiling. For a second, everything was silent except the hum of machinery. Then Mark groaned. "Well, that could have gone better." Zyra blinked, dazed. Caught me? Yeah, he said, helping her sit up. Humans have a habit of not letting people fall. She looked down at him, her expression unreadable. You risked injury for me. Wouldn't be the first time, Mark said with a grin. Now come on. Let's finish saving your station. Zira slowly nodded. Something in her eyes had changed. The cold doubt had softened into curiosity. Together they climbed back to their posts. Mark rerouted energy through a secondary path while Zira balanced the plasma flow. They shouted instructions back and forth across the chamber, their movements growing more in sync with every passing minute. When the last valve sealed and the pressure returned to normal, the red lights finally dimmed. The reactor glowed steadily again, calm, alive, and contained. Zira stared at the readouts.
It is stable.
You did it, we did it, Mark corrected her. Teamwork. Zira hesitated, then said softly, Your methods were unusual but effective, thanks. Coming from you, that's almost a compliment. She tilted her head, unsure if he was teasing her or not. Mark only smiled wider. Later in the maintenance bay, Zira helped him store the tools. The tension between them had eased a little. You humans, she began, are not what I expected. Oh? What did you expect? Loud, impatient, impulsive. She paused. You are all those things. But also brave, Mark laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. Zira looked thoughtful. You act before thinking, yet somehow it works. It is strange. That's how we survive, Mark said. We jump, we fall, we fix things, and we laugh about it later. Laugh, she repeated. At danger? Sure, if you don't laugh, fear wins. Zira was silent for a long time. Then unexpectedly she said, Perhaps that is why your kind never stops exploring. As they prepared to leave, Zira glanced at the floor mat where they had fallen. A faint smile touched her lips. That was quite a landing, Mark chuckled. You're telling me. My back's still sore, Zira shook her head. I think I understand now why humans always talk about experience. Some lessons are learned painfully. He laughed again. That's the spirit. When they stepped out of the reactor chamber, the station lights flickered back to normal. Crew members passed by, whispering that the power was finally stable. For the first time in days, the danger had passed. Zira looked at Mark one last time before leaving for her quarters. Lieutenant Harris, your presence here may not have been a mistake after all. He smiled. See? I told you we're not that bad. As she walked away, Zira's steps were calm but thoughtful. She had seen courage before, but never in such a simple, direct way. Humans didn't just talk about honor. They acted. Even when afraid, even when falling. That night, as the station's lights dimmed for rest cycle, Zira sat by her window looking at the stars. Her muscles still ached from the crash, and she winced slightly when she moved. She whispered softly to herself, half amused, half amazed. I still can't sit comfortably after last night. But this time she smiled, because the discomfort reminded her of something new. A strange, reckless, and wonderful kind of courage called humanity. The artificial day cycle ended on Varelia Station. Long corridors dimmed, lights softened, and the usual noise of traders and officers faded into quiet hums. Only a few maintenance teams remained awake, one of them deep in the reactor chamber, where two tired figures worked side by side under the flickering blue glow. Lieutenant Mark Harris stretched his arms, groaning softly. You'd think with all this advanced alien tech someone would invent a self-repairing power core. Zira Tal, standing on the opposite platform, replied calmly, Technology can fail. What matters is how quickly we adapt. Mark smiled. You sound like a human already. Zira didn't answer, but the corner of her mouth twitched slightly, almost a smile. She focused on the console in front of her, adjusting the reactor's stabilizer levels one by one. The screen showed steady blue lines now, not the wild red waves from before. The earlier near accident had shaken her deeply. She had never fallen like that, never felt so helpless. And yet the human, this simple engineer from Earth, had thrown himself under her without hesitation. It went against everything she had learned about humans being reckless or selfish. She stole a glance at him. His uniform was torn near the shoulder, a small burn mark visible from earlier sparks, yet he worked as if nothing had happened. Your arm, she said quietly. It still hurts, doesn't it? He looked at it and shrugged. Just a scratch. I've had worse fixing broken ships in asteroid fields. Zira tilted her head. Why risk so much for a stranger? Mark chuckled softly. Because that's what we do. Doesn't matter if you're human or alien, if someone's falling, you catch them. Zira looked away, pretending to check readings. Something about his simple words unsettled her. In her world, such thinking was rare. Virelians respected order and caution. But humans? They acted first, thought later, and then somehow survived. Hours passed slowly. The two worked in silence, except for the hum of tools and the low sound of air filters. Outside the wide window panels, the planet Virelia spun below, its surface glowing with faint green lights. Mark leaned over the central console. The temperature's dropping, a good sign, but we still have a small imbalance in the containment ring. Zira scanned the data. It is a complex pattern. The energy frequency keeps changing. Maybe the human method could help? Mark grinned. You're asking for human help? I might faint. I am only being practical, Zira replied quickly, trying to sound serious, though her tone softened a little. He pulled out his small portable analyzer. We humans fix things by trial and error. If it doesn't explode, it means we're doing fine. Zira blinked, confused. That is a very unsafe philosophy. Yeah, Mark said, twisting a valve open. But it keeps life exciting. She gave him a long look. You are a strange species. Thanks. I'll take that as a compliment. As the night went on, Zira began to relax a bit. She found herself asking him small questions. About Earth, about human life, about their strange habit of joking even when things went wrong. He told her stories while tightening bolts and adjusting panels. Once on Mars Outpost 12, a coolant pipe exploded right above me. I got covered in freezing mist, couldn't see a thing. My friend shouted, "You're frozen, man!" And I just yelled back, "At least the coffee's cold now." Zira blinked, not sure how to respond. That it was humorous. Mark grinned. Kind of. I do not understand how humans laugh at danger. We laugh because it means we're still alive, he said softly. And because sometimes that's all you can do. Zira looked at him quietly for a few seconds. Something about that answer felt deep. She had never thought of laughter as a weapon against fear, but for humans it seemed natural. Suddenly a low alarm beeped on the screen. The power fluctuation had returned, stronger this time. Zira's hands flew over the controls. Containment ring destabilizing again, she said sharply. Pressure rising fast. Mark ran to the reactor's core housing. We can't let it reach overload. I'll reroute through the manual circuits. Zira moved beside him. You cannot do that alone. It's too dangerous. Guess that makes two of us then, he replied. Together they opened the maintenance hatch. Bright blue light flooded out as the plasma coils vibrated. Energy pulsed wildly, sending small arcs across the panels. Mark grabbed a tool and began reconnecting wires manually, while Zira recalibrated the field emitters. Almost there, he shouted. Hold the regulator steady. Zira's hands trembled slightly from the vibration. Her kind wasn't used to such intense raw power, but she focused on the human's voice. Steady, confident, alive. It anchored her in the chaos. Finally, the light stabilized. The alarm fell silent. The chamber calmed. Zira let out a slow breath. Containment stable, you did it again. Mark slumped against a console, breathing hard. No, we did it. Teamwork, remember? Zira nodded, a faint warmth in her chest. Yes, teamwork. After the crisis passed, they decided to take a short break. The two sat near a wide viewport showing the distant stars. The room was quiet now, filled only with the soft hum of machinery. Mark opened a small silver pouch and took a sip of his ration drink. You want one? He asked, holding out another. Zira hesitated. I do not consume human fluids. It's just water and electrolytes. Might help you recover. She accepted it carefully, tasted a drop, and blinked in surprise. It is pleasant, Mark smiled. See? Not all human things are dangerous. She looked out the window. Your world must be very different. Oh, it is, Mark said. We have oceans, mountains, storms that can tear cities apart. But we keep rebuilding. Humans are stubborn that way. On Virelia, Zira said softly, we avoid danger. We plan for safety. Maybe that is why your kind explores the stars and ours only studies them. He shrugged. Different kinds of courage, maybe. They sat in silence for a moment. The stars glowed like silver dust beyond the glass. For the first time, Zira didn't see Mark as just a noisy human. She saw a being full of heart, flawed but fearless. As the long night continued, Zira grew tired. Her eyelids felt heavy, but she kept watching the readings. Mark noticed and said, You should rest a bit. I'll watch the system. I cannot sleep during work hours, she said firmly. He chuckled. Suit yourself. But if you fall asleep standing, I'm not catching you again. Her eyes widened slightly, remembering the earlier fall. You would not dare let me fall, Mark smiled. Try me. Zyra finally allowed herself a small laugh and soft, almost musical. It surprised her as much as him, see? He said. You're learning. Learning what? To laugh like a human. Hours later, dawn cycle lights brightened the corridors again. The shift was over. Zyra and Mark stood together, watching the reactor glow peacefully. The crisis was over, at least for now. Zyra rubbed her lower side and winced slightly. I still feel sore from the fall. Mark grinned. Yeah, I bet. That was quite a crash. I still can't sit comfortably after last night, she muttered under her breath. Mark looked at her, then burst into laughter. You're joking! Zyra crossed her arms, pretending to be serious. I am stating a fact. He laughed even harder. Welcome to the human side of humor. Zyra couldn't help but smile too. For the first time in her life, she felt something light and strange. Friendship with someone completely different. She looked at him and said softly, You humans are confusing, but interesting. And you Varelians, Mark replied, are smarter than you think. As the two walked out of the chamber, the station lights came fully alive. Morning had come again to Varelia Station, and somewhere between laughter, danger, and repairs, a small bridge between two worlds had been built. Zyra still felt sore, but she didn't mind. The pain reminded her of something important, that she had faced fear, survived it, and even laughed afterward. Maybe that was the human way. Maybe it wasn't foolish after all. Morning light from Varelia's sun filtered through the station's outer windows, reflecting against the polished metal walls. The usual hum of life returned. Alien traders moving through corridors, officers talking softly, and ships coming and going in organized patterns. For most people, it was just another peaceful day. But inside the main reactor control room, Lieutenant Mark Harris and Officer Zyra Tal were still running diagnostics. The night's emergency had been contained, yet several systems were still unstable. Mark had dark circles under his eyes, but he was smiling as always. Containment's holding steady, he said, checking a readout. Not bad for two people who almost blew up the station last night. Zyra folded her arms, pretending to look unimpressed. You mean two people who saved the station? He laughed. Right. I'll take that version. For a brief moment, things felt normal, almost peaceful, but that calm did not last long. Suddenly, a deep alarm echoed across the corridor. Red lights flashed above them and a robotic voice filled the air. Warning, unidentified vessel detected. All personnel report to defense stations. Zyra's head snapped toward the nearest console. Unidentified vessel? So close to orbit? Mark frowned. That doesn't sound like a friendly visit. They rushed out of the chamber, following the sound of alarms. The control center was full of movement. Officers running, screens flashing with red data streams, and voices filled with tension. On the main screen, a dark ship appeared against the stars, large, jagged, and glowing with faint crimson light. The Karn Syndicate, one officer whispered. Pirates, Mark's expression hardened. He had heard about them, raiders who attacked stations for fuel, data, and slaves. How far? He asked. Zyra checked the readings. 15,000 kilometers and closing fast. Their weapon systems are active. Her commander entered the room, voice sharp. All defense systems to standby. Prepare shields. The commander noticed Mark and frowned. Human, this is Varelian business. You have no place here. Before Mark could answer, Zyra stepped forward. With respect, Commander, he knows our reactor better than anyone right now. If we lose power, the shields will fail. The commander hesitated. Very well. But if he interferes, he won't, Zyra said quickly. He's with me. Mark nodded. Let's keep your station from turning into scrap metal. They hurried back to the reactor room. The hum of machinery was louder now, as emergency systems came online. Zyra activated the shield generator controls, but several lights blinked red. Power draw too high, she said, scanning the data. The shields will drain our reserves in minutes. Mark studied the readings. We can reroute backup energy from the core's coolant line. It's risky, but it'll give the shields enough power to hold. Zyra looked uncertain. That could overheat the reactor. I'll monitor it manually. Trust me, he said. She looked at him for a moment, remembering how he had caught her during the fall. how he had risked himself to save her life. She nodded. All right, let's do it. Outside, the Karn ship fired the first shot. A glowing red beam hit the station's outer shield, shaking the entire structure. Sparks burst from the ceiling, and small items fell from shelves. Mark held onto a railing. That one was close. Zyra's voice stayed calm but tight. Shields holding at 75%. Returning fire! Defense turrets around the station came alive, shooting beams of blue light into the void. The raider ship dodged and weaved, firing again. The entire station trembled. Reactor pressure rising, Mark said. We need to balance output now or we'll lose everything. Zyra climbed onto the upper platform and began typing commands into the control panel. Her hands moved quickly but precisely. Sweat ran down her neck as she worked. I am stabilizing the energy flow. Mark adjusted a valve below. Good, keep it steady. The hum of the reactor grew louder, almost like a roar. The blue plasma inside the core pulsed brightly, casting long shadows across their faces. Then the lights flickered. Zyra! Mark shouted. We're losing secondary conduits! I see it, she yelled back. I will reroute. Another explosion rocked the station. A control screen shattered beside her, spraying sparks. She stumbled, losing her grip. The floor beneath her feet cracked. Mark didn't hesitate. Hold on. He climbed the ladder and grabbed her wrist just as a burst of smoke filled the air. The sound of alarms surrounded them. Zyra coughed, voice strained. Why do you always run toward danger? He pulled her close, smiling despite the chaos. Someone's got to keep you from falling again. She gave a breathless laugh. You humans are impossible. Yeah, he said. That's kind of our thing. With their combined effort, they brought power back online. The shield readings climbed again. 80%, then 90%. The next enemy shot splashed harmlessly across the glowing barrier. The control room cheered over the comms. Shields holding. Zyra exhaled deeply, her shoulders dropping in relief. They are retreating. The Karn ship is pulling away. Mark smiled tiredly. Guess they didn't expect humans on board. Or fools, Zyra added quietly. He chuckled. Same thing, really. Later, after the attack ended, the commander arrived to inspect the damage. The chamber was filled with the smell of burnt circuits and metal. Wires hung from the ceiling. Zyra and Mark stood near the core, both exhausted. The commander's voice was low. The shields held longer than expected. I heard a human was responsible for that. Mark wiped his hands. Not just me. Zyra kept the system from melting. Zyra straightened. He saved the reactor again, Commander. The older Varelian studied Mark carefully. You risked a lot for a station that isn't your home. Mark shrugged. I was here. That's enough reason. The commander gave a slow nod. Maybe humans are not as reckless as we thought. Then he turned to Zyra. Good work, Officer Tal. You may rest. When he left, the two were alone again. The tension of the day began to fade, replaced by quiet exhaustion. Zyra leaned against the wall. You do realize your actions were very foolish, Mark smiled. Yeah, but they worked. You could have been hurt. I've been hurt worse fixing a toaster. She blinked. What is a toaster? He laughed. Never mind. For a few minutes they said nothing. The reactor's soft hum filled the silence between them. Zyra looked at the human beside her, tired, scarred, smiling as if saving a station was just another day at work. It made no sense to her. Her kind measured bravery by careful planning, not chaos. And yet, this chaos had saved them. You risk your life so easily, she said softly. Why? Mark looked up at the glowing reactor. Because life's short. You do what you can while you can. Zyra tilted her head. Strange logic. Maybe, he said. But it's the reason we humans made it this far. The station entered repair mode. Engineers, both human and Varelian, began working together. For the first time, Zyra noticed how naturally Mark blended in, giving quick orders, helping others, even making small jokes that made the alien technicians chuckle awkwardly. Later, as they walked through the corridor, she said, Your people. They bring noise wherever they go, he smiled. Noise is how we show we're alive. She looked thoughtful. Maybe that is not such a bad thing. That evening, as the station lights dimmed again, Zyra sat in her quarters, staring out the window at the stars. The pain in her side had mostly faded, though she still remembered the fall. She also remembered the human's hand grabbing hers, his voice in the smoke, his strange laughter in the middle of danger. She whispered quietly to herself, almost amused. He truly is impossible. Then she heard a soft chime, a message from Mark on her console. Reactor stable again. Not bad for our third near-death together. Zyra smiled despite herself. She typed a short reply. Try not to cause a fourth. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel alone among the stars. Somewhere deep inside, she realized she no longer saw humans as reckless outsiders. She saw them as something else, unpredictable, brave, and strangely comforting. Outside the window, the distant light of the Karn ship faded into the void. The threat was gone for now, but something new had begun. A quiet trust between two worlds. The calm of Virelia Station lasted only a few hours. By mid-cycle, long-range sensors detected multiple blips approaching the outer orbit. Unlike the single Karn raider from yesterday, this was an entire fleet. Massive ships with jagged hulls and red glowing engines moved in formation, cutting through the blackness like predators. In the reactor chamber, Mark Harris tightened his tool belt and checked the energy core. His hands were steady, but his heart beat faster. Looks like yesterday was just a warm-up, he muttered. Zyra Tal stood beside him, her four limbs tense with readiness. This is not a simple raid, she said. These ships are fully armed. If they reach the station, it could be destroyed in minutes. Mark nodded. Then let's make sure they don't. He pointed at the main console. We'll use the energy core to boost the shield system and power the defense turrets. It's risky, but it's the only way. Sierra's eyes widened. The core is still unstable from last night. If we overload it, Mark shrugged. Then we either fight or wait to be blown to pieces. I vote for fighting. Zira hesitated for a moment, then said firmly, Very well, let us act. Her voice held determination, but Mark noticed the slight tremor in her hands. The first wave of enemy ships reached the outer shield. Firelian turrets activated, firing bright beams of energy. Sparks flew as some shots connected with the incoming vessels, but the raiders were fast, dodging and weaving like predators who knew their prey was awake. The station trembled. Metal groaned. Alarms blared. Pressure readings rising, shouted a technician. The shields cannot hold for long. Mark grabbed the side rail of the reactor platform. Then we give it more power. Zyra, I need you to reroute the main energy flow into the shield conduits. I'll monitor the core. Zyra's fingers danced across the console. If we fail, the entire station. I trust you, Mark interrupted. We've been through worse. The core hummed loudly as energy surged through the conduits. Lights flickered across the chamber. Sparks flew from the edges, but the shield strengthened. A powerful blue aura surrounded the station, and enemy shots slammed against it, causing a resonant ringing that echoed through every hallway. Suddenly, one of the outer hull panels cracked under the force of a raider's cannon. Alarms shrieked. Metal bent and a pressure vent exploded nearby, sending a cloud of smoke into the room. Zira, Mark shouted. You're too close. Before she could respond, another shockwave threw her off balance. She fell toward the edge of the platform. Without thinking, Mark lunged, catching her by the waist with a strong human grip. His arms strained as the vibration of the reactor shook them. Zira gasped but did not resist. Why do you always run toward danger? She yelled over the alarms. Because someone has to, he replied. And I'm not letting you fall again. Her lips curved into a brief, breathless laugh. You humans are impossible, Mark grinned. Yeah, but it works. Together they climbed back to safety, their hearts pounding. Zyra steadied the shields while Mark rerouted the power manually, balancing the unstable flow like a tightrope walker on a stormy night. The raider ships advanced, their formations changing, their energy beams cutting through space. Mark and Zyra worked in sync now, a human and a Virelian moving as one. Mark noticed Zyra glancing at the reactor's energy spike. Careful. One wrong adjustment and it could explode. Zyra nodded, her hands flying over the controls. I will not fail. He leaned close. Remember last night? We survived then. We'll survive now. She smiled faintly, drawing courage from his presence. Together. With a final adjustment, they sent a surge through the shield grid. The blue energy intensified, forming a radiant barrier that pushed back against the enemy beams. The raiders struggled to penetrate it, their shots bouncing off harmlessly. Then Mark noticed something on the tactical display. Zyra, they're trying a flanking maneuver. 2 ships are heading toward the station's lower dock. Zyra's 4 limbs moved rapidly, redirecting turret fire. I will intercept them. You focus on stabilizing the reactor. As she climbed the side catwalk toward the defense turrets, a sudden shockwave from a nearby hit knocked her off balance. She barely managed to cling to the rails. Mark rushed to her, gripping her arm. "Hold on, I won't let you fall." Zira looked at him, shocked and grateful. "You again?" He smiled, bracing himself against the shaking platform. "Humans have a habit of repeating history." Zira laughed, the sound clear and light even amidst chaos. "Then we shall make it memorable." The battle raged for what felt like hours. The station shook with every shot, but the combined efforts of Mark and Zira held the shields and powered the turrets. Mark yelled over the alarm sounds. "We can't keep this up forever. We need a decisive strike." Zira's eyes scanned the tactical map. The Raider flagship is at the rear of their formation. If we target it with a focused shield pulse, we can disable their entire fleet. Mark nodded. "I can overload the reactor just enough to generate the pulse." "Zira, can you channel it through the shield grid?" "I will try," she said. Her fingers flew over the console controls, weaving the energy into a perfect arc. The core hummed, glowing brighter and brighter. Sparks flew from the floors and walls as energy built to a critical point. Both of them held their positions, bracing for the blast. Mark glanced at Zira. "Ready?" She nodded. "Ready." With a roar, the shield grid released the stored energy. A massive blue wave shot outward from the station, enveloping the enemy fleet. The flagship's engines overloaded and exploded in a brilliant flash of light, sending nearby ships spinning helplessly into the void. The remaining raiders retreated, disabled and disoriented. The station shuddered from the release, but the reactor held. Mark fell to his knees, exhausted but grinning. Zira sat nearby, catching her breath. "It worked," Mark whispered. "We did it." Zira nodded, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "Yes, together." After the battle, the station was quiet again, except for the hum of systems returning to normal. Emergency crews began repairing minor damage, and officers moved through corridors checking for survivors. The commander approached Mark and Zira. His expression was unreadable at first. "Lieutenant Harris, Officer Tal, you both risked your lives to save this station." Mark shrugged. "Just doing my job," Zira spoke. "We did it together. Humans are capable of courage." The commander paused, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps we have underestimated your kind." His eyes softened. "Both of you, well done." Mark and Zira exchanged a small, quiet smile. Words were not needed. They had fought, survived, and built a bond stronger than either had expected. Later, in a quiet corner of the station, Zira looked at Mark. Her muscles ached. Her body was sore, but she couldn't help smiling. "You humans always jump into danger without fear." Mark leaned back, tired but proud. "Fear's normal. It's how you act with it that matters." Zira's eyes glimmered. "I suppose your species has much to teach." "And your species has much to show us," Mark replied. "Brains and grace. A perfect combination." She shook her head, amused. "Do not flatter yourself too much, human." "But thank you," he grinned. "No problem. You do the same for me." She smiled, but her thoughts drifted to the night of the first accident. She had remembered every detail. His hand reaching for her, his calm voice amidst sparks and smoke, his simple courage that seemed to come naturally. She muttered under her breath, half amused, half pained. "I still can't sit comfortably after last night." Mark overheard and laughed softly. "I think we're creating a new Varelian tradition, complaining about human heroics." Zira rolled her eyes, but the corner of her mouth lifted in amusement. For the first time, she truly felt that humans were not reckless, not foolish. They were extraordinary in ways her people rarely understood. As the station repaired itself and the sun of Virelia rose again, Mark and Zira walked together through the corridors. The battle had tested them, shaped them, and built a connection neither could ignore. The threat was gone for now. But both knew the stars held endless challenges, and together they were ready. Virelia Station hummed quietly in the early cycles of the new day. The emergency alarms had long stopped, and most officers had returned to their routine duties. The scars of the battle were still visible, a few dented hull panels, damaged turrets, and scorched floors, but repairs were underway. For the first time in days, the station felt almost normal. In the reactor chamber, Lieutenant Mark Harris and Officer Zira Tal were performing final checks. The energy core glowed steadily, calm and contained. Both of them leaned over the console, reviewing every system. Everything looks stable, Mark said, stretching. I can finally stop holding my breath. Zira tapped a few commands. Shields, turrets, energy flow. All optimal. The station is fully operational again. Mark grinned. Feels good, doesn't it? From chaos to calm. Zira gave a small, almost shy smile. Yes, it is satisfying. She paused, then added softly. Thanks to your human methods, he chuckled. I'll take credit. But mostly we did it together. She glanced at him, a strange warmth in her eyes. Yes, together. The commander entered the chamber, his usual stern expression replaced by a rare smile. Lieutenant Harris, Officer Tal, the station survived and your efforts were extraordinary. Humans may indeed be. Braver than we assumed. Mark rubbed the back of his neck. Thanks, sir. But it wasn't just me. No, the commander said. It was both of you. And your cooperation, human and Varelian, reminds us that trust can bridge worlds. Zira inclined her head slightly. We learned from each other. The commander studied them for a moment. Perhaps this is the beginning of a new alliance. Not just between species, but between courage and wisdom. Mark looked at Zira and laughed softly. Sounds fancy, but I like it. Zira allowed herself a small, amused smile. Yes, it does sound fancy. After the commander left, the two of them walked through the station corridors. Outside, the stars sparkled like scattered diamonds. Ships passed quietly in orbit, some human, some Varelian, all moving in harmony. Mark paused at a viewport. You know, I never thought I'd survive 2 nights of near death, then see this view. Zira joined him, her fingers brushing lightly against the railing. You humans, you rush into danger, yet somehow you endure. It is unusual, he looked at her, smiling. Maybe that's what makes us human. She studied his face. Perhaps it is why I no longer see humans as reckless outsiders. Mark raised an eyebrow. Is that good? Very good, she said softly. It is comforting. They stood side by side watching the stars. The silence between them was not awkward but full of unspoken understanding. Both had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear, and both had learned something from the other. For Zira, it was courage beyond caution. For Mark, it was precision beyond improvisation. And together they realized that even among the stars, bonds could form stronger than fear. In the following days, the station fully recovered. Docking bays reopened, trading resumed, and engineers repaired every damaged panel. Mark helped where he could, offering advice and making small repairs that no one else would notice. Zira worked alongside him, not just commanding but participating. During quiet moments, she observed him closely. He joked with alien technicians, laughed at small mistakes, and never hesitated to put himself in harm's way if it meant protecting someone else. She found it remarkable. You never seem tired of risking yourself, she said one evening. They were inspecting a secondary power module far from the reactor. Mark shrugged. Fear's normal. Bravery is what you do with it, plus, someone has to make sure you don't fall again. He grinned. Zira tilted her head, a faint blush on her cheeks. I do not believe that was necessary. He laughed softly. Maybe not. But I'm glad I did. Later, they shared a quiet meal in the crew dining area. Varelian food was strange to him, glowing, slightly sweet, and textured in ways he didn't recognize. Zira watched him eat it with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. You humans, you consume everything so casually, she remarked. Mark chewed and nodded. We like to try things. You never know what works until you taste it. She raised a small brow. You find bravery in the mundane as well. Exactly, he said. Life's about more than survival. It's about experiencing it, and laughing when things go wrong. Zira considered that quietly, sipping a faintly glowing drink. Perhaps she had learned that lesson over the last few nights, that courage was not only measured by acts of battle, but by openness to life and trust in others. Days passed, and peace returned to the station. Mark prepared to return to Earth, his shift completed, but Zira remained. She accompanied him to the docking bay where his ship rested under bright lights. Lieutenant Harris, she said, voice soft. I wish you did not need to leave, Mark smiled. I'll be back, Zira, and by then maybe I'll teach you to laugh at even more dangerous things. She allowed a small laugh. Perhaps, but I still cannot sit comfortably after last night." He laughed warmly. "That's one memory you won't forget." Zira looked at him thoughtful. "Humans are impossible, yet I find that I admire it." "Impossible is our specialty," Mark replied. "And sometimes it's contagious." He shook her hand firmly, human style, and then hesitated. "You know, I never expected to meet someone like you. Someone brave, precise, and smart enough to make me nervous." Zira's eyes softened. "And I never expected a human to risk everything. So easily, so unexpectedly." They looked at each other, understanding passing silently between them. The station, the battle, the near deaths, all of it had created a bond neither could deny. Finally, Mark stepped aboard his ship. "I'll see you soon, Zira," she inclined her head. "Until then, Lieutenant Harris." The engines roared as his ship lifted off the dock, leaving behind a trail of light. Zira watched until it disappeared into the stars, smiling faintly. She whispered softly, "Perhaps humans are worth trusting, even when they are impossible." Later in the quiet of her quarters, Zira replayed the events of the last few days. Every moment in the reactor failure, the falls, the battle, the laughter, was vivid in her mind. And every moment carried a lesson. Courage was not just strength. Trust was not just rules. And friendship, even across species, was stronger than fear. She leaned back, muscles still sore, and murmured with a hint of amusement, "I still cannot sit comfortably after last night. But perhaps that is a small price to pay for courage." Outside her window, the stars shone bright, endless, and promising. Somewhere among them, a human engineer flew home, carrying with him memories of a blue-skinned officer who had changed his perception of alien life, and who had shown him that bravery, trust, and friendship were universal. Zira smiled again. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this was just the beginning, not only of a new alliance between humans and Varelians, but of something personal, unspoken, and extraordinary. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and wonders alike, and together, human and alien, they would face whatever came next.